Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Working Enneagram podcast. As always, this is the podcast where we talk about the Enneagram in the context of your work life, helping you use the wisdom of the Enneagram to bring more joy and more goodness to your work. I'm your host, Kelsey Taylor, and let me tell you, I am just absolutely thrilled to have somebody incredible joining us today. You know her, you love her. It is none other than Beth McCord, author and co founder of Your Enneagram Coach, and somebody that I have just personally admired for a really long time. Beth, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Kelsey. This is so fun. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited too. And today we're going to put the spotlight on you, which I'm sure you're just thrilled about as an Enneagram 9.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's my comfort zone, right?
Totally, totally. But we'll be chatting about Beth's career journey as a 9 and how the Enneagram has played a role not just in her work, but also in parenting, because we're going to get the scoop on her brand new book, Enneagram for Moms. And Beth, again, I'm just so excited to get this conversation started. But let's start with your family. Tell me about Jeff, Libby, and Nate.
All right. Yeah. So I've been married to Jeff for 29 years
Oh,
and we got married at,
congratulations.
yeah, thanks. We got married at 20 and had both our kids by 25. So we started really early. And Nate is 25 years old and he is a type 6. He's a social 6. So with a little bit of counterphobic 6 in him. And then our daughter Libby is 23 years old and just had 3 months ago our first grandson. So we're really having fun with him.
Oh my gosh.
And she is a type 2. And yeah, so really, have enjoyed really just being a grandma, I guess, like
Really?
that's just like people always say it's great. And I'm like, I was always like, really? Like, I really like what, what, like what's, because, parenting's hard. So I was having a hard time like really envisioning, but then it's like when you get there, you're like, oh, this totally makes sense. So anyway, we're having a really sweet time with that.
I love that. And she's just loving being an Enneagram 2 mom, I bet.
It really is. Yeah. And well, what's really fun is that her husband is a type 9, a social type 9, and he is a stay at home dad. And so she works full time at home.
Mhm.
She's a social media manager, and they're just a great tag team. I mean, it's just been really fun to watch them. And he really enjoys being a dad and being there for his son and just kind of watch them. I'm like, oh, that's so sweet. But so yeah, yeah, she loves being a mom.
Yay.
Yeah, which is great. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Okay. How is Jeff responding to grandparenting? Has that been a fun transition for him too?
Yes, very much. Yeah. I guess it's something that you just can't really explain until you're there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like parenting, right? Like you think you've read about it, you think you know, and then you become a parent, you're like, oh, now I understand. Uh,
100%.
yeah, so he's really enjoying it. Of course, I probably hog, so his name is Augustine, and we call him Augie. And so I kind of hog Augie more than, Jeff is just really sweet. He just lets me kind of hold Augie more
That's
than
the
he
best.
gets to. But he's really, really enjoying
Oh,
being,
good.
he's Papa and I'm Mima.
Mimo. Cute. I love that. Well, congratulations, first
Thanks.
grandchild. That's so exciting.
Yeah, thank
How
you.
do you know, Beth, how do you know beyond the shadow of a doubt that you are an Enneagram 1? I'm sorry, an Enneagram 9. I'm a
Yeah.
1. You're a 9.
Oh, that one pops up though. Yeah, so I started studying the Enneagram back in 2001 when I was 26 years old. The kids were 3 and 1 years old, so a long time ago.
Mhm.
Um, and it was in a season where Jeff and I, being married so young, we just had turbulence, like I think a lot of marriages do.
Mhm.
But I couldn't explain what was happening within me or what my needs were or what I wanted. I knew what I didn't want or what I didn't like,
Mhm.
but I didn't know what I wanted. And so that just made it harder for us to get through those turbulent times.
Mhm.
Because if you if you don't know what's going on, you can't then work on it. So when I started reading about the Enneagram, the 9 really popped out to me pretty quickly. But I absolutely hate tension. I hate conflict, especially directed at me. Oh my gosh, I just kind of would rather die. Um, and yeah, I just want comfort, peace, harmony. Like, can't we all just get along? Like, how is this so hard, people? Um, and so, and then of course the sloth, the internal not knowing.
Mhm.
Obviously, that's just what I described a second ago.
Yes.
That is the forever me. If you were to say right now, oh, Beth, what are you going to do the next day or 5 years? I would be a deer in the headlights once again. Like, I don't know. I got to think about it. And even though I know myself better, those kinds of questions always are going to trip me up. And I just know
Mhm.
that now. And so whenever I'm on podcast and people have those questions, I'm like, okay, as long as they tell me ahead of time, I can think about it. But if they tell me in the moment, then it's going to be like, I don't know. So for all of those reasons, but the last one I would say is the core longing, the message our heart longs to hear
Mhm.
is for the 9 is to hear that your presence matters. And when I read that, I can still remember, really reading it or at least seeing it for the first time,
Mm.
right? I may have read it before, but seeing it for the first time
Yes.
was about 15 years ago. So it was after I'd been studying the Enneagram for a while, but for some reason, this one day I can still see myself in the living room and I just started weeping. No one else was around, but I just started weeping like, oh my gosh, yes, that is what I long for.
Mhm.
And so the journey really has just been bringing that message back to myself,
Mhm.
because we try to get it from, a variety of other places. And as much as people and objects and careers might even say it to us,
Mhm.
we have a hard time fully believing it. And so it's my own work that I have to do on a daily basis to remind myself that my voice and my presence do matter and
Yeah.
that showing up not only is worth it, it's fun. So here I
Yeah.
am.
Oh, beautifully said. I love that. I love it so much. You'd mentioned having early in the marriage, having a hard time acknowledging what your needs are, or really like you knew what you didn't want, but it was really hard to know what you want. And we touched on this a little, but I do think for nines, there is an extra layer to that for sure. Like you're saying, if you don't know what your core desires, your motivations are, your core fears are, it's really hard to communicate that. But I think even for a 9, once you do know, it's still kind of foggy and hard to communicate that. Is that a
Oh,
fair?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Just, let's say, let me think. Like if I want to do something within my business, let's say I want to take it in a certain direction.
Hmm.
I may not have even the full clarity of what I want that to look like or what it needs to look like. There are moments where I have a gut reaction and I get inspired, but it will take time usually for me to get there. Whereas maybe like a type 8 or a 7 or a 3, or really any of the other types, they might really see it with clarity. Whereas for me, it might take some more time. And that's what I usually encourage people that are in relationship with 9s, whether it's like a romantic relationship, a work relationship, friendship, whatever it is to recognize that the 9s, we're not trying to be frustrating or difficult. I tell people, like, let's say you and I were walking side by side, and let's say we need to go to a Walgreens store that is like a quarter of a mile down the road.
Hmm.
So it's not too far, but it's there. Well, for most of the other types, it's a fairly clear day. Like they can see it and they just kind of keep walking. It's no problem. For me, it's like there's a big, thick fog right in front of me. I can't see the Walgreens. And then, depending on how thick the fog is, meaning how unaware of myself I am, or maybe I'm struggling,
Hmm.
depends on how thick that fog is and how slow I'm going to have to walk.
Hmm.
And because if it's really thick, you're not going to just start walking fast. Like you got to make sure you're not going to trip over anything, like a stick on the road or whatever. It's like you have to take your time. And so then the person next to me who has no fog, one of the other Enneagram types, they're like, can we please hurry? Like, this is really annoying. Like, why do you not know? And I think if other types recognize that and they have their own, like, just driving in the fog, like, you can't just go at the speed you normally would. You have to slow it down. You have to be very cautious and aware. It just is what it is. Now, as a 9, I can do my own due diligence in getting to know myself better.
Mm.
And hopefully over time, that fog will become more of a haze, but it's going to ebb and flow in seasons, right? So when I am struggling, those seasons are going to be much more thick fog. And when I'm doing really well and I am clear minded, it's going to be more of a haze. And so for people to come alongside the 9s in their life and understand that this isn't like I'm trying to do this, a lot of it is tied to the fear of upsetting people. So if they're upset
Mm.
that I am struggling with this whole thing, you're only making the fog get worse.
Mhm.
Whereas if you come alongside the 9 with empathy and understanding and compassion, then it can be a much more delightful experience for both people. Even though I know it's not at the same pace that others want, it can be accomplished in a quicker mode
For
when
sure.
there is that compassion and empathy happening.
I love that. And, there's nobody who died from slowing down. Like, that's just, you know, that's
I
just
mean, if anything, the turtle won the race, right?
that's right. That's right. So you are co-founder of Your Enneagram Coach, and that has been somewhat of a long kind of endeavor. But I want to hear your whole story from your career, like first job up until your Enneagram Coach.
Oh, oops, sorry. Yeah, so like first job is in like when I was 15 years old.
Totally, give it to me.
So my first job when I was 15 years old was at the Gap.
Oh,
And
fun.
I was there very short amount of time, very short. And folding the clothes all day was not my cup of tea. And I mean, I was 15, you know.
Yes.
But then I would say my longer term job when I was in high school was at a kind of like a UPS store. It had a different name back then. And so we just shipped, people would bring in something and I would get a box out and put it in and ship it off. And then there was times where I would like fill envelopes, like maybe 1,000 envelopes, and send them off, or, so there's just all different things happening. And I mean, that was a pretty good job for the most part. I think as a lot of young kids felt so unsure about myself, but I think as a 9, it was even more so. Um, just because it's like, oh, who am I? What am I doing? Am I upsetting the customers? Am I upsetting my boss? Just this constant narrative.
Hmm.
And that was hard. And then just kind of fast forward, my college degree was in sign language interpreting. So nothing like what I'm doing
I
today.
love that so much. But you could, if you needed to, you could
I
sign.
could I could have a conversation. Yes. I
Incredible.
wouldn't be able to interpret right now because that was 27 years ago. Because I did it for a full year, but then Jeff went into ministry and kind of took me out of an area where I could really be doing that full time for several years. And so by then I had the kiddos and was a stay-at-home mom for most of their life. I did do some work in between, but then where the things really started to just change. So, like I said, I started with the kids, or started studying the Enneagram when they were 1 and 3. But as a good 9, I kind of kept it quiet and just studied myself. Um, but I would talk about it with Jeff here and there, and he thought it was interesting, but he wasn't enamored with it like I was. But then he started seeing some changes within me. And over time, he became more interested in it. Now, he did mistype himself for 5 years, though I will toot my own horn. I guessed right. But but he was like, it was the same type as my mom, which is a type 6. She's extreme phobic 6. He's more on the counterphobic side.
Mhm,
And he was like, there's no way I'm that. I'm, nothing like your mom.
mhm,
Yes, true on the outside, very true. But the core motivations are still the same. And so he thought he was an 8. Makes sense.
mhm.
Um, so anyway, that was part of our journey. And then we started using it with couples in our church and started to see their lives grow. And it was just fascinating watching the things that I was learning to work in their life. But during this whole time, I was thinking, well, Jeff's the pastor, so people are going to want to hear him more than me. like total 9 internal language, right?
Yep.
So I was like, okay, I'll just be, and I didn't think about it in this term, but I'll be like Wizard of Oz behind the scene, like pulling the levers, and Jeff can kind of be the spokesperson. And so we did that for several years. And then I worked for Michael Hyatt. He is the founder of, well, it was Michael Hyatt and Company.
Mhm.
Now it's Full Focus. But I was his personal assistant, and I got to see what is it like to develop a platform, like your own desire or your own passion behind the scenes, like this online company. And so I was like, huh. So seeing how it all worked, I was like, I wonder if I could do that with the Enneagram. And this was back in like 2015, and was just learning from them. And in 2016, I had my own little wake up call, like this type 9 anger moment, like feeling very overlooked. And I was like, I'm just going to get out there and do it. So, like, my 8 really just was charging me on the inside. And then 3 was definitely like, okay, well, let's do this then. So that's when I got everything put together with certification and all that stuff. And then got Your Enneagram Coach domain, and then just took off. Well, that was about when I started that, it was about 8 months, 9 months before The Road Back to You came out. So think of it as me being on a surfboard, and I'm out there like getting ready for a big wave, having no idea it was actually a tsunami coming. And that's really what happened. So in the fall, the tsunami came. And at that time, I was actually already, when the book came out, I was already putting together my first Become an Enneagram Coach course
Mhm.
and certification program. And so when it came out, it just became, like I said, the tsunami effect, and people were really excited about learning about the Enneagram, learning about themselves, helping their relationships. And so it's kind of just been this really incredible ride ever since.
I love that you're saying the tsunami is an incredible ride because that is sometimes that's just life. You're like, yeah, it's going to be this beautiful wave, and and
You
God is
just,
like,
you gotta hang on for dear life. Now, I would say at least from what I've been seeing, the tsunami has become more of a typical wave, in the ocean now.
yeah,
It's still happening. People are still interested, but it's not all encompassing like it was. And so it's a little bit more manageable, I
that's
would say.
awesome, man. That is awesome. Do you know Michael Hyatt's Enneagram Type? Is he a 3?
Oh, yes, he's a 3. He's a, self-pres 3, yeah.
Okay,
He
okay.
and what you see is who he is. He's just a very dear,
Oh,
supportive, yeah, like, he is just a great person, and just
that's
in
awesome.
general. I really enjoyed working with him. It was hard to step aside and do, I mean, but of course I was wanting to do the work, and they cheered me on, of course. I was like, "Well, it's kind of your fault, like, you." I literally followed what you kinda said to do. But yeah, they're just fantastic
Oh,
people.
I love that. I'm so glad you got that experience, and
Me
I
too.
threes are that's typical. They're so inspirational, and
Yes.
they help at least me in my life. I'm like, "Oh, you inspire me to do things that I just would never ever think of without
Yeah.
you in my
Exactly.
life."
And that's what I love about like a healthy 3, instead of it being about me, as
Mhm.
in like if I'm the type 3, it's not about me, it's about us.
Right, right.
And or it's about you, like the other person. And they are the greatest mentors, cheerleaders, supporters, coaches. And that's really what I found, not just with him, but just the people that they hired as well. Just fantastic.
I love that. That's awesome. I'm going to transition a little bit more into motherhood. So you
Sure.
described this fog for the 9. I love the way that you describe that. I'm going to be using that when I'm teaching. This
Yeah.
fog, like slow down because they can't literally see the feet right in front of them. They need that time. That is
Yes.
super helpful. Aside from that fog, how would you describe what it's like to be an Enneagram 9 mom?
Oh, it's hard. I'm sure there's other I'm sure there's other 9s out there that, have a different experience. I think part of it has to do with I mean, a lot of it has to do with my 9ness, but a lot of it also has to do with kind of like how I was raised. My mom was, like I said, a very phobic 6. She kind of grew up with her own trauma. And so she was codependent and really taught me codependent tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't help when you're already a 9. It's like,
Truly.
so I was very consumed with uh, wanting to make my kids happy.
Mm-hmm.
And if anyone knows, that's like an impossible job.
Truly. You
And
cannot.
so, but there were so many different parts happening within me, now that I look back, I can see, there's the type 1 part that was like, okay, you can't just be passive. We have to discipline. There's right
Right.
things to do. There's responsibilities. And the 6 was thinking about all worst case scenarios. There's just lots of things going on. Um, okay. I don't know if you could hear my granddog is not having this right now. The door is like half open, half closed. So let me just tell her to
Go for it. Yes.
come on in.
Come on in.
All right. She's like, I can't. The door is not fully open. I don't know. Can you hear her kind of
A little.
whining?
I heard a little just.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just open the door because I'm
Go
not sure
for
where the
it.
rest of the family is. So just was like. But anyway, so being a mom, I think was really hard. Growing up with just a codependent mindset of we need to make everyone happy. We have to be accommodating. We have to um, not have conflict. Like I was already being taught that,
Mm-hmm.
but that was also my personality.
Yes.
So with the kids, I had so many conflicting internal messages of wanting to make sure that they were raised well, that they got good discipline, but not too much discipline where they felt, not seen or heard or felt special. So I was just constantly dealing with this influx of things happening within me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thankful that I was able, I feel like, to at least parent them really well while I was working on myself.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of things, of course, I've had to say I'm sorry for, or own up to, or talk through with them. Um, but the Enneagram really gave the language even throughout those years. So I even knew kind of like a lot of what was going on. Like if I was trying to people please and I was upset that they didn't like a meal that I made, and I felt crushed, or whatever. It's like, I just own it. But it was really hard. So, and I don't know what all type 9 feel, because I think it's just it runs the gamut. Some are just going to love it, some are going to have a hard time with it. But for me, it was really hard. And that's one reason why I wrote the book, because I wanted other moms to understand their own internal world and why there are going to be seasons or aspects of parenting that are going to be really hard because of how they see the world, why they interact with the world through their personality type. Now, I'm sure there's like type 8s out there that are listening to this or 7 are like, I don't understand. Why do you care so much about what your kids like them being happy? Like that's not the point of and I'm like, I know, but that's the lens through which I saw the world. And so I wanted to write a book that wasn't just to type 9 moms, which of course I could have easily done. Um, I wanted all moms to know that you were designed to be you. There's nothing wrong with you. There's that you are a beautiful representation of your type, and God wanted you to be you to
Right.
your kids.
Right.
And so I wanted to write that book to give them insights on what is it going to be like when you're struggling in your type,
Mm-hmm.
when you might be overdoing your type and not actually helping your kids, but also what do you like when you're at your best?
Mm-hmm.
And to really lean into that, because even though your kids may not be your type, which my kids are not my type,
Mm-hmm.
you still have so much to give and for them to glean from. It doesn't mean they're going to become your type, because they're not,
Right.
but you have so much great stuff to give them, and we want to lean into that. So that's really why I wrote the book, because I knew I had struggled so much, and I just thought other moms could really enjoy learning more about themselves in the process.
It's beautifully said. I think there's such a good framework too when you're able to say, oh, here's where I'm overdoing it, or here's where I'm just right in the sweet spot, and here's where I'm maybe out of alignment. And you do such a great job of structuring that for all 9 types
Oh,
in
thanks.
the book. Yes, yeah. But one thing I really love, you mentioned in the book, this quote: without realizing it, we can expect our kids to show up in the world thinking, feeling, and behaving just like us. And we generally consider the ways that we do things to be the right ways, which is why we do them.
Yeah,
So
right.
naturally, we want our children to do the same. But when our kids show up differently, sometimes it can make us feel confused, frustrated, even disappointed. I love bringing this up, just bringing it up to awareness that
Mhm.
our kids have different motivations than we do. And sometimes that causes us to be like, oh, for me as a one, am I parenting them the wrong way? Did I make a mistake somewhere?
Right.
So I'd love your insights into that phenomenon of just our kids are different than us, and that's an okay thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do. We're trying to make many versions of ourselves, whether we realize it or not. So, like, like for you as a type one, of course, that makes sense that you would want kids to want to improve things, to do things right, to do things well. Excellence is important. Um, but it's interesting how we just really see things so differently, because I have a friend who, she and her husband are both type nines, and these are worker that worked for us in the past, and we were all sitting around talking about how we pray for our kids. And she was like, yeah, we pray our kids to be empathetic and kind and compassionate, and I'm sitting there like, well, yeah, like that's just normal, and then a type 8 in our group chimes in. She's like, really? Oh, no, 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 I pray that my kid is a warrior and that they're no be no, and my jaw just was on the ground. Like, I had never considered
Mm-hmm.
how all the 9 types are going to pray for their kids, what they're hoping for their kids,
Yes.
and really how they're guiding and steering their kids in a very specific way. And like I said earlier, that's beautiful and wonderful. And we have to make room for who they are as well. So
Right.
it's a both and.
Yes.
Um, and so, like, for like a type one, or especially for me as a type 9, if I had a type 8 kid, woo, that would be really hard, because they're going to challenge me. They're going to be okay with conflict. They're going to say the hard things. They're going to be blunt and honest, even at their healthiest. And how am I going to deal with that as a type 9 parent, by not, because honestly, if I didn't know the Enneagram, I would just want to, like, totally eliminate that. That would not be okay in my world. Like, you are not to be disrespectful, talk
Mhm.
back, be too blunt, be harsh, say things so honestly, and conflict. Who wants conflict? Like, let's just get along. Well, I would have totally just squashed the type 8 child, because I would have really felt and seen that their way of living and seeing the world was wrong.
Mhm.
And that's not necessarily true. Now,
Right.
yes, even a type 9 kid who, let's say, is not as healthy, they're going to be very passive. They're not going to actually get things done. They're going to avoid. But at 9 at their best, they are going to be kind. They're going to get things done. They're going to be assertive. So what I'm saying about that is, the type 8 child, yes, there are going to be times where they're unhealthy and they're being combative in a way that is not beneficial, not for them or for me. But there's going to be times where they do need to say what needs to be said. They need to stand up. They need to protect themselves. And how can I, as a parent, even as a type 9, guide them to be the best version of who God created them to be? Now, that is super hard when you don't know their type yet. And you're
Mhm.
like, okay, are they being combative in a good way? Like, are they like, what's happening here? So it is a mystery. It is hard, but I think us parents need to be very mindful, first and foremost, of our type and how we typically try to make many versions of ourselves, and instead impart to them the best of what we have, while not trying to create our type in them. Does that make sense?
100%. Absolutely. I'm listening to you and my brain is just firing on all cylinders. There's so many I'm thinking of. Like recently, my husband, Ben, who's an Enneagram 2, we celebrated our 11-year anniversary.
Yay.
And yeah, we're asking questions like what do we hope for our kids and what do we
Yeah.
think who will they marry? These are the things that we're asking each other. And one thing Ben said, I won't ever forget it, was, I hope that we are best friends with our kids' spouses. And it's so sweet. And I'm like, of course you do. Of course you do.
Yeah.
I
That's great.
do. Why would
That's what I
you?
do.
Yeah. And me, I'm thinking like, I hope our kids never leave the church and they stay strong in their faith. And like, these are the hopes and dreams they're tailored through our own Enneagram lenses. And so we had
Absolutely.
really fun conversations around that. But it is the way that we pray for our children and the things that we hope for them are definitely influenced by our type. And so
Mhm.
I,
And I mean, what's interesting is, and I'm sure you know this really well, with your podcast really being about work, pretty much everything I'm saying applies to the work environment too. It's just different language, it's a different relationship. So you have to just kind of tweak how you see it, use it. But it's the same thing. Like if you're a boss, you're going to want your employees to be just like you until you realize, wait, no, actually, I don't. I really need them to be different
yeah,
because I have my own weaknesses. I need them, but there are going to be tendencies like a parent to do similar things. And so, this book and books like it can be used and applicable in both arenas. You're just going to have to kind of tweak some of the language enough to be able to see it through the lens of work.
absolutely. And you do such a good job of breaking down core motivations in part 2 of the book. So I love the way that the book is structured. You intentionally made it so that the chapters were easy to read. In part 1, you could just sneak away to the bathroom and read for 10 minutes because you know that moms have busy lives. But I love that it is applicable because, one, if you're a working mom, everything that you're doing at home, when that is working well, it influences your work life. And two, just like you said, you have
Yes.
how the Enneagram 9 communicates, and that's for all Enneagram types, how they communicate when they're at their best, which translates very easily over into the to work environment. I'm glad
It
that you
does.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
it really does. And I just really encourage people to, when they use Enneagram material, to recognize that yes, you can use it in one sphere, but try to use the same thing that you're learning in that book and see how you can utilize it in multiple spheres in your life.
mhm,
I think that helps us to grasp the Enneagram in new and richer and deeper ways when we're not just like, oh, well, this is what I'm like in work and this is what I'm like in parenting. And they
yes,
don't cross over. It's like, no, it's actually not true at all. We write books and materials so to help the end user not to do all the mental gymnastics all the time.
right.
Um, but if you are at a place where you understand the Enneagram enough, I would highly recommend you just kind of seeing within yourself, like, oh, okay, so this is how I talk when I'm not as healthy with my kids. And this is what I talk like
Mhm,
when I am healthy. Huh, I wonder what that's like at work with those relationships and see how it can be similar. It's not going to be a one for one all the time because they're different relationships, but where are some of the similarities and why? So,
mhm,
anyway, just a
mm.
little sidetrack there.
I love it. Well, you mentioned too that we are raising little versions or mini versions of ourselves. And so the type 1 parent's going to be focused typically on raising little principled reformers. Can
Hmm.
you give me a brief rundown of what all 9 types are trying to create in their kids?
Yes, absolutely. So the type ones, like you just said, they're trying to make little principled reformers. So they want their kids to do what is right, what is good. Um, and they really fear their kids really being irresponsible or disrespectful. And so they're really looking to be little principled reformers. The type twos are looking to make their kids into nurturing supporters. So
Mhm.
they're all about connection, helping, nurturing, advising others, really in the state of being helpful. They really don't want their children to be rejected or not wanted. And so they feel that, well, if I teach them how to be helpful and compassionate to others, they won't ever be rejected because people always want someone around to be helpful and kind and all that stuff.
Mhm.
The type 3 are trying to create many versions of admirable achievers. So the type 3s are like, let's achieve. This is going to be great. I'm going to get you from point A to point B. Um, so they're looking to help their kids excel, to do great, excellent work, whether that is in school, music,
Mhm.
sports, you name it, or just their personality or their image. How do I make them excel?
Mhm.
Now, the type 4s are looking to make little introspective individualists. So the type 4s are helping their kids to find their true self, their authentic self, who they desire to be. And so for them, they're going to be talking to them in their inner world. Actually, she's okay now. I'd open the door. My son's here. He's like, "Come on, Andy," and I'm like, she's okay now. She's just chilling out with me here." Um, okay, so the 4 is like, but I want them to know them and be who they, were meant to be.
Mhm.
Um, and then the type 5 is looking to create little analytical investigators. They want their kids to have all the knowledge and the information so that they are not caught being ignorant or unprepared
Mhm.
from a logical standpoint. So they're going to help their kids really dig into data and information and learning and all those fun
These are the
things.
parents who, like, give books for Christmas.
Yeah, yeah, or, like, go to museums and, like, I don't think I'm like, "Do we?" Yeah, we went to some museums, but they weren't anyway, it was not probably how it was with the 5. The type 6s, which I know this because my husband's a 6, they're looking to create faithful guardians. So they are helping their kids to develop, like, a sense of loyalty and, um an ability to see what others need, kind of like a 2. And in fact, sometimes 6s are the most helpful because they feel like they need to be committed and responsible and loyal to those that they either love or they feel responsible for. And so they're wanting to help their kids to be that responsible figure, but from this loyalty, dutiful standpoint.
Mhm.
Um, but also, I will say they're making sure that their kids have all the information. It's kind of like a 5, but they're very different in how they do this. They have all the information so they're prepared. They're not, because most 6s feel like they walk into situations like, I don't know what to do. And they don't have enough trust in themselves to do it. So they're wanting to impart to their kids information so they don't feel that feeling. They feel prepared. The type 7s, my dad was a 7, so I totally know what this is like. They are creating a little entertaining optimist or enthusiastic optimist. So it's all about seeing the bright side of life. Like everything's going to be great. Everything's going to be fun. Everything's an adventure. We don't have time to sulk. And it's not that they, because my dad, if I was sad, there's room for it a little bit, but not for very long. Like, okay, let's go off and do this next fun thing. Or, oh, you're sad. Well, let's spin it into something, good.
Yes.
And they feel like that is going to actually help the child when in fact sometimes it totally goes with the movie Inside Out, the first movie, where Joy is trying to get rid of sadness. And no, sadness is a part of life. So when the entertaining optimist, the 7, can bring in all aspects of life, oof, that's where it really shines. And then the type 8s are trying to develop little passionate protectors. Like I said earlier, like that mom who's like, no, I'm praying for them to be a warrior and to be strong and their no be no. So they're
Mhm.
really looking for their kids to be resilient, strong, the protectors of themselves and those that really matter in their life. And then me as a type 9, absolutely 100%. I'm trying to create peaceful accommodators. Of course, we're going to accommodate. Like, why wouldn't you accommodate? Why wouldn't you be flexible? Why wouldn't you be kind and giving to others? Like, isn't that what we all do? And when I talk to all parents, that's what they'll say about their type. Well, like, but isn't that what we're supposed to do? Like, I was talking to a type 4 and like, but isn't that the best right way? And I just laughed and I'm like, it is one great way of parenting,
Yes.
but it's not the way. There are 9 different great ways of parenting when we're at our healthiest. And so we just don't see it necessarily from other people's lenses. But I think it's important because, if you're raising your children with a partner, spouse, whoever it is, other guardians, we need to know what their lenses are, their personality, how they are trying to influence their kids, whether in positive or negative ways, but so that we can support their efforts too. But like I said, but not to create many versions of ourselves, but to impart the best of what we have as we try to raise our kids to be who they were created to be, their personality. So that's a rundown of all 9 types and what we're trying to do.
That was so good. So beautifully said. And I know if you're hearing all of those 9 types and you do not know your Enneagram type, that is a really good way to get started. Both Beth and I have free Enneagram assessments that I will link in the show notes. So take both, and those are really helpful starting points if you're looking to get your Enneagram journey started. Beth
Right.
also has a ton of resources for those who are just new to the Enneagram, and you can sign up for Enneagram coaching, which I'll link to her Enneagram website where you can sign up for Enneagram coaching to kind of help develop and hone in what type you might be. So, quick plug for that. And as for those of you who are familiar with your Enneagram type, maybe you're asking this question, well, how do I know if I'm healthy or unhealthy? And I want to talk about this term that you use in the book, Beth, called emotional sobriety. I'm just fascinated with this term. I love it so much. And so I'm going to read directly from page 33 where you write, in our journey as parents and in all of our relationships, it's important to strive for emotional sobriety and self-regulation. Big time agree. But how would you define emotional sobriety? And Beth, how do I get there? How do I
Yeah.
achieve that?
Yeah. I think, just like kind of think of the word, like a lot of times we can get, let's say, emotionally drunk or dysregulated, if you will, where we're really kind of either addicted to excitement, we're addicted to fear, we're addicted to drama. And even the 9 is. I'm addicted to other people's dramas and trying to make sure that there's no more drama. Like, I
Mhm.
think a lot of us don't even understand how we're in a typical pattern because we've always been in that pattern.
Right.
And so the Enneagram helps us to really understand where we can get derailed or get like emotionally dysregulated and why. So when you understand the why, now usually what happens is we see it and we kind of shame ourselves or guilt ourselves or condemn ourselves. It's like this cycle. And we're trying to help people to become aware. And we have an acronym in our book called AWARE, AWARE. So the first one is to become awakened. So we want you to become awakened to your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, both healthy and unhealthy. And so you are much more aware of when you are self regulated and dysregulated.
Mhm.
And so you think of the Enneagram as this tool, like a rumble strip on the highway. Okay. So you're driving down, and then, we start to like fall asleep. Or like even as parents, we're like kind of swatting at the kids in the back, like, please stop, and then we're not paying attention. So whatever the reason is, we start to veer off course. If we're going so fast where we're not aware or awakened to what's going on, we just go right through that rumble strip and we're not even paying attention. And there we are in that same common pitfall once again. And most of us say, how did I get here again? Don't I know better? Or
Mhm.
like, haven't I learned my lesson? We kind of want to pull our hair out and we really put ourselves down. But the Enneagram is this rumble strip. And the more you read about it and you don't bring it in as shame or condemnation of yourself or guilt, and you recognize, okay, as a type 9, when there's conflict around me, I am going to start to feel uncomfortable and I'm going to want to jump to helping everyone in an accommodating way, or I'm going to want to withdraw and isolate.
Mhm.
So when those kinds of things start happening, I can now better hear that rumble strip. So, another rumble strip in my life is when I think or feel my presence and voice don't matter. So,
Mhm.
let's say I've told the kids to do something and they don't do it. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, see, nobody cares about me, or I feel so disrespected.
Yes.
And that's my rumble strip, right? So when I start to think those thoughts, feel those feelings, or do those certain things of my types, less healthy characteristics, I can use that as a rumble strip, an alert system. Now, when you hit the rumble strip, are you going to take the wheel and go to the right even harder and faster? Well, that's when we're shaming ourselves and guilting ourselves. And then we really land into that ditch, right?
Mhm.
So we don't want to do that. So when we hit the rumble strip, we want to ease ourselves back into the healthiest path. And to do that is where the second W, which is welcome. We want to welcome our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. We want to welcome this insight without shame and guilt or condemnation. And that's really hard to do, but it's so important. That's where we take that wheel and we're like, okay, here's the rumble strip. And it might take a long time. Like you might be hearing it for a while and it's like, ugh. But we don't want to move ourselves so quickly that we're like veering off to the left too hard either. So taking our time, and we can do this with a second A, which is ask for what's true. Sometimes that's using the Enneagram tool to see what's actually true, what's going on. Maybe it's asking a friend, a partner, if your kids are older, because this book is not just for young moms. This is for moms like myself who have adult children. In fact, it can work even more beautifully when your kids are older.
Mhm.
And so ask for what's true. And then the R is receive what is true. Okay. So we might hear what's true, but we might discount it, but actually receive what's true. And the last E, or the last letter E, is engage. Engage in your life and your relationships in a new way based off of that truth. Okay. And a lot of this can be hard if we don't do that W, if we don't welcome without shame and condemnation. And so these are all really important factors to self regulate, to be self aware, so that we have emotional sobriety. And that is just so that I can come with my emotions or become sober minded. I can come with my thoughts without them being just everywhere. And usually they're everywhere because I can't welcome what's happening within me or around me without shaming, guilt, or condemnation. And so that's the key part. When we're able to do that, we're able to say, you know what? Yeah, you're right. I totally, when I felt the family, let's say for me as a 9, getting really disagreeing or upset, I left.
Mhm.
I left the room. I didn't want to be a part of it. Well, sometimes that can be a healthy thing, but let's say in the moment it wasn't healthy. I'm out of here, right?
Mhm.
And my
Mhm.
kids still say, like, if there's one phrase mom says, it's I'm out of here. Um, and, so for me, can I get back into an emotionally or mentally sober position to engage with them with
Mhm.
who they are, their Enneagram type, their life situation? And it's more important for us parents to do our own inner work, our own self regulation than pretty much anything. Because you may not even know your type, your kid's type for a long time. If they're not interested, you might be an adult parent like me, and your kids are like, I don't care, And so you're left with really doing your own work to the best of your ability to interact with what you know of them. And so it's our own inner work that's the most important. And so we use the acronym AWARE in any given situation that will help us to get to that sober minded or emotionally sober place. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's so
Okay.
good. I'm hearing that too, and I'm realizing that's the work that we all need to do. All 9 types need to do is bringing that awareness, welcoming. I'm so glad you said that was one of the harder parts, and one of the more important parts. I found that to be so true in my
Mm-hmm.
own Enneagram journey.
Yeah.
Like just recently, our community got hit with an F2 tornado, and
Oh, wow.
it was crazy, and so many people have lost their roofs, their backyards, and we were very fortunate in that we still have a very manageable, livable house and space. And
Oh, wow.
it just happened to be right around the time of our anniversary. And so I woke up in the middle of the night the other day after we had spent a decent amount of money, not an overwhelming amount, but a decent amount of money celebrating our anniversary. And my inner critic is waking me up at like 2 a.m. saying, "You're really irresponsible for doing that. You've got a roof that you need to replace, you've got a fence that you need to replace. How could you waste money?" And so that it is that moment where I'm like, okay, let's take a step back. I am feeling guilty and shameful for spending money on my relationship. Let's sit with that and acknowledge what it is, but then let's ask, like, is that true? Am I actually being irresponsible? Because I
Right.
think I could argue that that is a very responsible thing to invest in the marriage, especially
Absolutely.
during a stressful time. So that is the alternative is I don't take the time to question that or sit with it or welcome the hard feelings. And then I don't spend any money on my husband because it feels irresponsible, and that's all subconscious. So
Yeah.
there's
And so what you're doing is you're owning your own domain, your own world, and you're also training yourself, because here's the thing. Being activated or triggered or those thoughts coming into your mind is not wrong in and of itself.
Mhm,
Those are going to happen. Things are going to activate you. They're going to trigger certain feelings, thoughts, behaviors, inclinations, etc. That is not the problem. The problem is, what do we do with it?
mhm,
And the solution is to be aware enough of ourselves to understand when those thoughts, and a lot of times they're false thoughts or unhelpful thoughts,
mhm,
when we aren't aware enough, and like you said, they just take us off into their own direction. And so being able to sit with whatever those thoughts or feelings are and then re-examine after we get to that welcome place, like, okay, I am feeling
mhm,
irresponsible. I am thinking I'm irresponsible, whatever, because it could be a both. It could be maybe you're just having thoughts, because you're a type one. So you're in the logical place. Maybe you weren't actually feeling it. You were just having the thoughts, or maybe you were having both. So assessing what's going on
mhm,
and then bringing that welcome piece in is so important, because it doesn't take much time at all. I think our world, our society, I think a false sense of religion wants to heap on that we should be shamed, we should feel guilty, we should, all the shoulds basically.
right.
And I just disagree. I feel like, okay, let's reevaluate. These are going to pop up, but let's reevaluate and use this information to actually get us on our healthiest path, because all 9 types are truly the best people in the world when we are at our best.
Mhm,
And we can be there on a regular basis when we're okay with the fact that we will get dysregulated. It doesn't mean that we're bad people, that we will get dysregulated in one form or another. But what are we going to do with that dysregulation is what's really, really important, whether you're in the workplace or as a parent or as a spouse. So I love what you said, because what you're saying with your situation is absolutely true. Of course, your inner critic is going to question you. Absolutely. That makes total sense. And to be able to reflect and to communicate back with that part of you, I hear you. I understand what you're saying. There
mhm,
is some truth to it, right? There is some wisdom to it.
mm,
And there's also other things that it may not be fully aware of or mature enough to really accept. And
right.
so you can bring the healthier version of yourself and kind of teach, mentor, train, uh, inform that part of you, like, thank you for trying to make sure we have enough money for things.
Mhm,
But in this incident, it's not being irresponsible. We were mindful and thoughtful, and my relationship is absolutely important, and to celebrate it's a big deal. Plus, you have a type 2 husband. It's a big deal for type 2s to celebrate. And
mhm.
so all the more that you are moving towards something that would mean a lot to him as well, which is just as important. So anyway,
Love that.
that's my soapbox on that one.
I do wanna pick your brain on something. So as a, one mom, I love the idea of, again, being a perfect mom, and so I have to fight that often and just being a present, mom,
Yes.
which you mentioned in the book, present over perfection, connection over perfection.
Yep.
And part of my way of being the quote perfect mom, and even unhealthy and healthy, being a connected mom, is knowing my kids' Enneagram types. Now they're almost 7, almost 9, both
Mm-hmm.
boys. And I have an open hand with what I think both of them are. I think my oldest is probably a 1 and my
Uh-huh.
youngest is probably a 7.
Mhm.
And I am curious, how do you advise parents to approach typing their kids? Can you do it? Should you do it?
Mm.
And what other thoughts or insights do you have on that?
Yeah, great question. Um, so, like I said, I raised my kids starting with the Enneagram at 1 and 3. So I've been through that journey. And again, my kids are 23 and 25. So I've been through the whole gamut. Um, and I've also seen other parents with the same question that are close to me. And in fact, a lot of my team who are Enneagram experts as well go through the same thing that I went through. And I always kind of chuckle because I'm like, I know I was trying to warn you, but so okay, so what that all is about is we all, and it's great that parents want to know their kids type. That's great. We should be students of our kids, but you can't type your kids. They have to type themselves. And what I mean by that is that doesn't mean you just can't do anything. That doesn't mean, oh, well, I can't use the Enneagram with them until they type themselves. No, that's not what I'm saying. One, you use the Enneagram first and foremost with yourself, and we use it in a way that offers them their own emotional intelligence. Um, and I'll kind of get to that in a second. But in typing your kids, what's interesting is when your kids, and this, I write this in the book, when your kids are born, they are like a can of white base paint, right? So you go up to the counter, and let's say, like my daughter, oh my gosh, when she was 6 years old, she wanted Kermit the Frog green on her walls. And yes, as a type 9, I let it happen. It was terrible. Anyway, um, but when we picked that color, when she picked that color, when they put it, under the thing and the colors go in, there's a mixture of lots of different colors going into the base pan. It's not just Kermit the Frog green. It's all the different colors that will mix eventually to that one color.
Mhm.
But once they put the mixture of the color in, it just goes to the bottom of the paint. If you were just to look at it, it'd look like a can of white paint, but the colors are in there. So when our kids are given to us, um, they are not fully formed. I do believe their personality is there and
Mhm.
it's functioning, but they're trying to absorb the world, understand the world through our lens, our spouse's lens, coaches, teachers, etc. They're trying to figure everything out, and all of life is kind of mixing up that paint. Well, all of a sudden, some yellow pops up in a season, right? As you're mixing, like, oh, there's that yellow, and oh, there's that blue, and oh, all these different colors are emerging. So then you might go, oh, well, if it's yellow, they're definitely this type. And then another season comes along, like, wait a second, no, maybe they're this type.
Mhm.
And so it's really important for parents to be curious, but to not land on a type, um, because there's so many layers to the Enneagram, and we use all 9 types to varying degrees. So there might be a season where your kid is using your personality because they've been around it the most, or maybe their best friend, or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, and especially, like, we'll just take teenage girls as an example. You could easily think that most teenage girls are Enneagram 4s because we have a lot of emotions that are dysregulated for lots of varying reasons.
Mhm.
Um, and so a parent could easily go, oh, well, they're definitely this type. Well, that may not be the truth at all. It
Mhm.
just might be that season, there's a lot going on, that there are things that look like a type
Okay.
4. And
Mhm.
so that's what's happened with me and my team. Like, it's like, oh, well, I think, like I thought my son was a 1 or a 2. And when he was about 8 years old, I was like, hey, Nate, okay, so you helped that kid. Was that because it was the right thing to do, or because you wanted to be helpful? And he just kind of was like, yeah, both. Like, what are you talking about? And it ends up that Nate is a type 6. He's a social 6. And and then if you really get into the Enneagram, his tri-type is a 6-1-2. So I was on the right track, but I didn't see the 6 until he was older. And so if I had landed and put him in a box that he is a type 1, I really would have been parenting him from from a not the right angle. Now, there
Mhm.
would have been some things that were kind of true,
Sure.
but it just wouldn't have been the best. So I really recommend that parents hold a few types loosely, be very curious, ask lots of questions, but just don't land on that type yet until they are willing and wanting to find their type. And I
Mhm.
did the same thing with my daughter. It's like, oh, she's definitely a 9 like me, like a 9 with an 8 wing. No, she's a 2. And she is very much a 2. She's okay with conflict now that she's older, but she was trying because twos want to be loved and wanted and appreciated. She was trying to morph into me when she was younger. And then when she became a teenager, she was like, conflict, yeah, conflict's fine if you need it. I'm like, wait, what? Mind blown. Like, and so my kids were about 14 when they both found their type, but they had also been around the Enneagram. Now, being around the Enneagram, I didn't use the word Enneagram or the language of the Enneagram a lot because that gets really annoying really fast to kids. They think that you're just teaching and whatever.
Mhm.
So you just really want to talk about it without necessarily getting annoying about it.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so I think, and then when they get older, there's moments where you sprinkle it in a little there, because one part of my book I talk about how my kids were aware that my false message as a 9 is that my
Mhm.
presence doesn't matter, my voice doesn't matter. Well, I had moments where I was explaining to them me and
Mhm.
how I work, how I function, how I think in false and good ways. And those over course of years, it's not like you just sit down with them and say, this is the thing. But if something popped up, it's like, yeah, you know what, mom, this is kind of how my personality thinks and I have to really work on it, blah, blah, blah. Um, so when they were older, they were able to understand me from an Enneagram perspective. And we had just this really great moment where they were able to move towards me with compassion,
Mhm.
understanding, because they actually knew me through all the years that we've kind of worked together and understanding each other.
I love that. That was one of my questions reading the book. You shared this story. Nate and Libby kind of make a mess in the kitchen, and you say, "Hey,
Yes.
guys, could you clean this up, baby?" You go to work. Several hours later, you come back. They're still playing video games, as kids do in the summer. So
Yep.
you shared with them, "Hey, this makes me feel that wounding message. This makes me feel unnoticed, unheard, not respected, and like I don't matter." And so my question is, at what age do you feel like your kids kind of click? But what you're saying is there's no specific or magical age, but it is years of teaching them about themselves and teaching them about you and learning about them and them
Yeah.
learning about you.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, because that message, it could have been like, maybe we had another incident where I had asked them to do something else, like when they were like 5 or something, and they didn't do it. I might, because like that's like a nuclear button in the 9, like, so see, like I don't care, I'm not important. And so that's my rumble strip. And
Mhm.
so by letting the kids know age appropriately, like, you know what, mom, I have this false thought that people don't listen to me on purpose because I don't matter. And that's my own work to do.
Mhm.
But sometimes when you don't listen to mom, I do get hurt because that's how I see the world. Um, and I just want you to, so there's this age appropriateness. And then as they get older, you can talk about it in more depth and detail in a way that also invites them to understand, well, then what might your false messages be? Like, what are some things that you constantly hear? Because I'm a type 9 on the Enneagram, but there's 9 types. And you aren't me. Now, you might have my same type, but probably not. So I'm curious about you and your inner world and how I can support you the most. And so, yeah, that summer day when I came back downstairs, I cannot tell you that nuclear button was hit. Like, because they were like, "Yeah, mom, I totally will clean it up, no problem." And the hard part about that situation is they were having a great time. There was this kind of peace and harmony in the home. And I'm about ready to want to blow it all up because I felt
Mhm.
disrespected and unheard. And when I, explained it to them, they were like, "Mom, I totally understand why you would think and feel that way. That makes sense from your perspective as a type 9, but that isn't what we were thinking or feeling.
Mhm.
We were just being teenagers caught up, but we totally understand. We're sorry. You do matter." and we'll clean it up right now. And I was like floored, like, wait a second, does this does this actually work? I mean, because I mean, when you have moments like that and you've worked so hard all those years and you have one moment, because, it's not like every day was like that in the McCord household,
Exactly. Yes.
but even just to have that one moment, like, okay, my kids are able to see outside themselves and see someone else and how
Mhm.
they were hurt and to apologize and own it meant so much to me, not because of just me, but I knew that they could go out into society and be able to see other people for who they were, not just through their own lens, but also hopefully, since I was able to explain my inner world in a hopefully a not intrusive way, but in a way that was helpful, they'll be able to do that as well. Because we want our kids to be able to say, this is where I'm at, or this is where I'm struggling, while
Yeah.
also encouraging them to tend to themselves, care for themselves. And at times they do need outside help depending on the level of need. And that's just so it's really great to have this kind of language around the home.
Mhm. Mhm. I love that. Beth, this has been so good. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights, your wisdom. I love, again, you have phenomenal analogies. The rumple strip, the paint can, the fog. It's so helpful to bring that kind of imagery into the Enneagram. And with your permission, I will steal all of those and
Yes, totally.
use it in my own teaching.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today. If somebody is interested in pre-ordering the book or wants to hear more about how to be a mom through the lens of the Enneagram, what can they do?
Yeah. I mean, everything that we have is through yourenneagramcoach.com, our handles on social media. The book is also at enneagramformoms.com. And so we've got some great resources there as well. And so I just recommend they can go pre-order there, because if they pre-order there, there's also a button to get extra goodies and freebies and all this stuff
Hey.
that we really made specifically for the seasons of life that moms go through. And like I said, this isn't just for young moms. This is for moms and grandmas and great grandmas, because it's never too late to work on your relationship with your kids, or even you with your parents, and seeing it through their lens as well. So I would just say go to enneagramformoms.com to get their book.
I love it. Thank you, Beth. My favorite part of the book, hands down, is the prayer that you write
Mm.
for each of the 9 types. It's so moving. And if you want that prayer, head over to your enneagramcoach.com. Is that what you said?
Uh-huh.
Yes,
Yourenneagramcoach.com. Yep.
perfect. And I will be sure to link that also again in the show notes. Thank you for your time. I loved having you, and I hope you have a phenomenal launch with your book.
Thank you, Kelsey. This is great. Thanks.